All right, let's talk about what just happened in London. A massive protest, one that literally brought the city to a standstill. And it's a story that's all about deep divisions, clashing ideas of identity, and believe me, it has captured attention from all over the world.
So let's just start with a number, because this really sets the scene. Up to 150,000 people. That's how many are estimated to have hit the streets, making this one of the biggest right-wing demonstrations the UK has seen in a very long time.
Now, 150,000 is a huge number, but it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? Well, let's put it into perspective. If you adjust for population, a protest this big in the UK is like seeing over 3 million people marching on a single day in India. We're not just talking about a big crowd. This is a seismic event for the country.
So you gotta ask, who is the man at the absolute center of this storm? Well, his name is Tommy Robinson. He's a well-known anti-immigration activist, and how you see him, well, it completely depends on who you're talking to. He is, without a doubt, one of the most polarizing figures in the UK today.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because there are two completely opposite ways of looking at this guy. His supporters, they see a patriot, a champion of free speech, who's being silenced for telling truths that others are afraid to. His critics, they see a dangerous far-right extremist, someone who spreads hate and is a genuine threat to social harmony.
Okay, so to really get what's going on and why he called this protest, we have to understand why he was in jail recently. And it wasn't for his political opinions, but for a very specific legal crime called contempt of court.
So how did this all go down? Well, it started back in 2018 with some public allegations he made. That led to a defamation lawsuit, which he lost. Then, a judge issued a court order basically saying, you cannot repeat these claims. And what did he do? He repeated them publicly. And that's the key. That's the whole reason he was imprisoned. Not for the original claims, but for directly and openly disobeying a judge's order. That's a huge deal in the justice system.
All right, so he gets out of prison, and he immediately calls on his supporters to take to the streets. But what was the protest actually about? What was the one core message that pulled in such a massive crowd?
This was it. This was the slogan you heard everywhere, chanted by thousands and thousands of people as they marched through London. It's simple, it's powerful, and it gets right to the heart of what they were there for.
Now, if you ask the protesters, they'll tell you something very specific. They'll say, look, this isn't about legal, controlled immigration. Their focus, their real problem, is with what they call uncontrolled mass migration, and specifically, people arriving in small boats seeking asylum. They feel the whole system is being exploited and that this is eroding their national identity and putting British culture itself at risk.
But that is not the whole story. Because on the exact same day, at the exact same time, a totally different group was marching through London with a very, very different message and a stark warning for the country. And their message? It was a direct shot back at the first group. Now, they were smaller in numbers, for sure, but their counter-protest was just as passionate, with an urgent, opposing message for anyone who was listening.
You see, for this group, this had nothing to do with a legitimate debate about immigration policy. They saw a march that was spreading hate. They were there to stand up against what they see as dangerous racism and a rising tide of fascism that they believe threatens the UK's whole multicultural society and puts minority communities in danger.
So you have this very British, very domestic issue, right? A story about UK politics. But then it just exploded onto the world stage, and a lot of that escalation was thanks to one person jumping into the conversation, a very famous, very powerful person.
Yep, Elon Musk. He actually joined a live conversation with Tommy Robinson while the protest was happening. And this one sentence he said, either you fight back or you die. Well, it just lit a match online, amplifying this thing to millions and millions of people all over the world.
And instantly the internet split right down the middle. On one side, people saw it as a rallying cry, a necessary call for people to stand up and preserve their culture. But on the other side, people saw it as a reckless and incredibly dangerous incitement to violence. The debate just raged.
So, okay, why should someone sitting in India, or really anywhere outside the UK, care about this protest in London? Well, the answer is in how certain communities were specifically pulled into the conversation. And this is it, right here. In an interview, Tommy Robinson made this very specific point. He claimed his problem wasn't with immigrants in general, or even all immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. No, he singled out, quote, radicalized Muslims from India and Muslims coming from Pakistan.
And just like that, a domestic UK protest becomes a global conversation. It brings the debate right to the doorstep of the Indian diaspora all over the world. It really just goes to show how these arguments about immigration and national identity, they're not local anymore. They're all interconnected, pulling communities from across the globe into political fights happening thousands of miles away.
So when you strip it all away, you're left with this really tough, provocative question. Is what we're seeing here a nation's legitimate fight to preserve its culture and survive in the face of what it sees as mass migration, or are we just watching a dangerous rise of intolerance that's being dressed up as patriotism? Right now, on the streets of London and all across the internet, that is the question being fiercely debated.